Hello and welcome back to my channel. In today's video, we're going to be painting this Northern Lights Arctic scene. Before we get into it, if you want to follow along exactly, all of the brushes that I'll be using are linked in the description below. The texture brushes are from 2 packs by Lisa Glanz, the Instant Artist pack and the Delicious Texture pack. We'll be going over how to combine all of these different textures that mesh together really well. I love using these in tandem. The texture that I am using, which is really what makes this painting, is from the Magic Canvas pack, which is also by Lisa Glanz. These textures are insane and I am loving it. I am so here for it. Here's what it looks like without the canvas effect and with the canvas effect. So you can see it's a huge difference. The color palette that I am using is my March color palette. It is available to my newsletter subscribers. You can become one by signing up, following the link also in the description, but also up here in the cards. If you're not already, be sure to subscribe to my channel and turn on the bell to get notified every time I release a new video. All right, let's get into it. I am working in the Dramatic Painterly canvas. I am using the smaller of the 2 sizes that comes with this set. When you first import the canvas, there's just one single drawing layer and a texture stack above that. But what I've added in here are 6 layers and renamed them to help you follow along. I will be adding a couple more layers here and there that are clipping masks, but this is what I'm going to start out with. The very first thing I'm going to do is tap background here to change the background color, and I'm going to select this mid blue color. And already you can see all of the texture of the canvas effect, which looks really cool and is going to be perfect for this ocean scene. With the background colored, I'm going to start in here on this Shoreline layer, and I'm grabbing the selection tool. And I have it set to rectangle, which will allow me to draw a nice crisp line. I'm going to select the upper portion of the canvas. So starting on the outer edge here, I'm going to draw down until I have selected a little less than half of the top half of the canvas. And with the top part selected, we can draw our shoreline. I'm going to pull out my color palette here so that it is floating in the window. I'll zoom in so you can see what I'm doing nice and large, and I'm going to select this cream color here. And to draw this shoreline, I'll be using the Big Fat Pencil brush, which is from the Instant Artist set. And what I've done here with my brushes, I'll just note, I've pulled the ones that I'm using for this project all to the very top of the set, but you'll see me switch between these 2 packs. This way, when I switch in between, I don't have to scroll through my brushes. If you want to create a new brush set and pull all of the brushes for the project into that, that's a really easy way to navigate between them too. I'm going to do this so that you see when I'm switching to a brush in a different pack. So starting off with the Big Fat Pencil, I'm going to adjust the size so it's pretty large, and I'm just going to draw in an abstract, distant shoreline. And I want to give that slightly panoramic feel, so I'm having the highest hills on the right and left side, and then it curves down in the middle a little bit, which will give us more of that wide angle look. Then I'm going to switch to this dark teal color, and I'm going to decrease both my size and my brush opacity a bit. And still on this layer, I'm just going to layer in some darker pigment, but I'm still keeping some of that cream color visible at the top of the hills. And then because my brush opacity is set lower, I am using a couple layers of color along the selection line here to make it fade into a slightly darker color. I'm going to deselect, and we're going to create a mirrored reflection of this. So to do that, I'm going to duplicate my layer by just swiping over, and then on the duplicate layer, I'm selecting that, and then I'm going to tap the transform arrow from here, tapping flip vertical. And I also have snapping and magnetics turned on so that it stays perfectly aligned. You can see the guides snap up and I'm going to drag it down until it meets the bottom of the shoreline. The reflection then is perfectly mirrored. Then I'm going to decrease the opacity down to about 60%, which gives us that nice look. Now on this next layer here, I'm going to reselect. So press and hold on the selection tool and that will pull up your most recent selection. So because this was the last selection that I used, it automatically pulls that back up again. Then be sure to tap into the brush tool so you don't make any additional selections with the selection tool. And on the brush tool, I'm going to choose this Build Up Spray brush to draw in some stars. I'm switching over back to this cream color. And I have my brush size set to the largest size. I'm just gonna tap a few times. This is a really cool texture that I like that it builds up this starry effect without being too intense. So I definitely want it to show up, but I don't want it to be overwhelming. While I'm here, I'm gonna hop up to this water light layer and I'm going to bring back up my selection toolbar. So I'm gonna press and hold on the selection tool. And because I still had that selection live, I am just going to tap invert and now we have just the sea selected. Then I'm going to move on to this mint color and I'm going to jump over to this delicate dust and scratches brush. This brush, I'll paint in quickly here. You can see the brush tip itself. I have it on the largest size and it's still pretty small, so it's going to take me a while to scribble in. So to make that faster, I'm going to increase the overall size of the brush. It's not permanent, you can go back. When I go into properties under brush behavior, maximum size here is already maxed out. So the brush engine is saying that this is as big as the brush is going to get. To increase the overall size, what you can do is go into stroke path, which is the first option here, and increase the spacing. And you don't want to do it too much because it will separate out the stamps. But if you increase the spacing to like under 10% and then go back down into properties, you can see I now have a lot more slider to increase my brush size. So it doesn't have to be at maximum again here. I'm just going to increase it to about there. Looks good. And then when you want to go reset the brush, what you can do afterward is go into about this brush and tap reset brush and it'll bring it back to the originally created settings. I'm going to tap done here because I want to save my larger brush size. Now I need to reload my selection because when I edited the brush, it disappeared. So what I'm going to do is tap and hold on the selection tool, which will bring up my most recent selection. And then I'm going to tap back into the brush tool. And with this mint, I'm going to paint in this texture. And I'm going to do it a few times over. And you'll notice that the grain, so the texture of this brush, stays in the same location. I'm not increasing the amount of coverage very much. The grain texture is not moving around, but it is increasing the intensity a little bit as I go over it a few times. And I like how that looks. So I'm gonna do it till it's covered about that much. And you can see the big difference in using the larger brush size, how it helps me draw a little faster. Then with this drawn and selected, I'm going to tap the wand tool here to get into the adjustments, and then I'm going to tap perspective blur. From here, I'm tapping layer because we're going to blur the whole layer, and I'm going to zoom out so that I can reposition this point here for the blur direction. And then using a finger, I'm going to drag across the screen, and you can see this blue bar here that pops up at the top. I'm going to increase it to 100%. And now you can see if I move the point, you can see that the blur direction changes. It looks like subtle rays of light coming through and becoming refracted in the water. Then I'm going to tap the wand again to apply the changes. And now I'm going to jump down to my iceberg layer. On this layer, I've released my selection and I'm going to tap the selection tool again. And this time, instead of rectangle, I'm going to move to the freehand selection. Now from here, My iceberg is going to be set somewhat forward, so the point at which the iceberg is level with the surface of the water is going to be down somewhat, and the perspective of it will be that it's closer to you as the viewer. I'm going to start with a point somewhat down from my original horizon line, and then using the freehand selection tool, I'm going to just tap in between points here, which will allow me to create this nice crisp iceberg shape. And the nice thing about the selection tool and tapping in between points by lifting up your pencil for each selection that you make, you can use 2 fingers to tap and undo or 3 fingers to redo, just as you would when you were drawing. Now I want my widest points, which will be where the iceberg emerges from the water, so where the surface of the water is, I want those to be generally on the same horizontal plane. So it doesn't have to be totally perfect, but I think that's generally where it's at. And then I'm going to do the same of drawing these points here, but I'm making it a little longer on the bottom than I am on the upper half. Once this is filled in, I'm going to pull this dark purple color to fill the selection there. Then I'm going to deselect, and you'll notice this has this nice edge texture, and then this looks so harsh in contrasting. So to make this look like it fits more within the piece, while I'm still on this layer, I'm going to jump back up to the big fat pencil brush, and I'm using 100% opacity. I'm going to decrease my brush size here. I'm going to rough up these edges a bit. I'm still following the lines that I drew in the selection, but this will give me edge texture that fits a lot more within the overall painting. I'm also going to reposition this just slightly, so I'm going to tap my selection tool, which will grab the entire layer, and move this so it's not quite so crowded over here, and it pops up a little beyond these hills in the background. Then I'm going to add a new layer on top, and I'm going to make this into a clipping mask. So I tap to bring up this side menu, and then I'm tapping clipping mask. And on this layer, I'm selecting back in the cream, and still on this big fat pencil brush, I am increasing my brush size to 100%, and then I'm scribbling all over to fill in the entire selection. And I'm actually going to go over it twice so I have a little less texture. Next, we're going to create a layer mask to remove some of the color in a non-destructive way to define some of the planes of this iceberg. So to do that, I'm tapping once more on this cream iceberg layer, and then I'm going to tap above clipping mask this mask option, and then making sure that I have the layer mask selected. So you can see there's a difference in these two blues. One is a brighter blue, that means that I'm on this layer. So making sure that I am on the layer mask, I'm tapping into the eraser tool. And with this eraser, I'm going to use the soft canvas builder brush, which will give us a complementary canvas texture to the canvas texture that we're working with all over. From here, I'm going to decrease my brush size, and I'm going to erase little triangles here to create a little more depth within this iceberg. I'm only going to do this really on the top portion because we'll be obscuring most of the bottom half since it'll be underwater. And if you want a nice crisp look, you can draw a line and then keep your pencil to the screen until this notification pops up that says line created, which will create a perfectly straight line. Once you have erased enough planes that you're happy with, on the top portion, we are going to select off the bottom portion. So grabbing the selection tool, setting it on a rectangle, I'm going to start from the bottom and select up until the widest point of the iceberg, which is going to be where it emerges from the water. And then using the eraser still on the soft canvas builder brush, I'm increasing the brush size all the way up. And again, I'm still on that mask layer, and I'm going to fully erase here, but because this is a texture brush, it will leave enough white that it looks like it's still made of ice. Now I'm going to deselect, and I just want to add some texture to this horizontal line. So still on this same brush, I'm going to decrease the brush size. Because I'm on the layer mask, I will only be erasing here, and I'm going to draw just a straight line across. And once more, so it's a little darker, and that way it's just a little less crisp. Next, we can move down to the narwhal layer. For this, I'm going to use this mint green color, and to draw it, I'm sticking with the big fat pencil brush. And similar to the iceberg, the top portion is where we're going to have the detail, so don't worry too much about drawing the shape of the body super accurately. What you want is a nice rounded head that will be above water. And then the body, we can draw it tapering off here. And again, we're going to obscure it, so don't stress about making it a perfect shape. Drawing the tail here, which these are almost little leaf shapes. And we'll give him some fins. Then I'm going to zoom in on the head, and switching to this cream color, I'm decreasing the brush size here to about 10%, and I'm going to draw the horn with one single stroke. Because this brush is pressure sensitive, what I'm doing is I'm applying more pressure at the beginning of the stroke and less towards the end to allow it to taper off to a point. And then I am going to clean this up just a little bit. Then I'm going to select this dark purple color, and I'm decreasing my brush size here to about 1%. I'm going to zoom in and rotate my canvas to draw this little bean eye. This is super simple. We're just making him a cute character. But I think a great way to customize this painting and really make it your own would be to add in a penguin or a little seal, polar bear even. I think is a really good way to make it uniquely yours. Next, back in my layers panel, I'm going to tap on this layer to bring up the side menu. And then just like with the iceberg, I'm going to select mask, and making sure that I am directly on that mask layer, I am using the selection tool to draw a rectangle up to right above the fin so that just his head is above water. Then with this selected, I'm going to use the eraser tool, and the eraser I have set still to the soft canvas builder, and I'm going to erase all over here. And once more, we're going to soften that line. So now to really give it that underwater look, I'm selecting back down on the narwhal layer, and with the smudge tool, I'm using the greasy sponge brush. I'm going to smudge inward on this, which by using these horizontal strokes here will help give it that underwater look of distorting it. And I don't want to completely lose sight of what the body shape looks like, but I do want to remove some of that crispness. Then I'm going to move to this base iceberg layer, so the dark purple one, and I'm doing the same thing with the smudge tool here, smudging across in horizontal brush strokes. Now I'm going to, above my narwhal layer, add an empty layer. I'm tapping this to bring up the side menu, and I'm making this a clipping mask. We're going to add some shading. So for the shading, I am setting the layer blend mode to multiply, and then I'm going to automatically decrease my layer opacity down to about 75. Then I'm going to select this purple color. And from the Delicious Texture Pack, I'm using this powder brush. And using super light pressure, I'm gonna build up this shade and texture. And I'm gonna play around with my brush opacity as well so that it doesn't get too intense. Zooming in here, and you can see I'm adding just a little bit of shading on the underside of the horn. Then above my iceberg, I'm going to do the same thing. So above the cream layer that has the mask, I'm adding an empty layer, and I'm going to tap to bring up the side menu and tap clipping mask, still using the powder brush and this purple color, setting the layer blend mode to multiply and layer opacity to 75%. And for this, I'm increasing my brush size all the way so I can do some big sweeping strokes. Next, I'm going to add one layer above this that's then below my Northern Lights and my water light layer, and this is not going to be a clipping mask, but I am going to set the blend mode to multiply here. And with this powdery brush, I'm just going to extend this horizontal line a little bit and sort of add a little bit of shade around this iceberg that I think will help make this look like they are more a part of the scene. And this is just really subtle. I've also been itching to darken this horizon line up a bit, so I'm using this opportunity to just shade some in here. And now we can add the Northern Lights. So on my very top layer, I'm selecting the greasy sponge brush on the paintbrush, and this is from the Delicious Texture Pack. And I'm starting with this green. I have my brush size here set to about 45%. And we're gonna start drawing in some squiggles. And I am going to play with my brush size a bit here. So decreasing it a little bit so I can vary the width of these. And it's going to look strange at first, but we'll apply a cool effect that will really transform this. So you can see I'm just scribbling in rather roughly here. Then I'm selecting just a solid white, and I'm going to add this as a bright accent. So I'm not going to be using any blend modes on this, so adding the white will really help it pop. The pure white adds the brightness factor. Then I'm going to switch to this bright pink, and I'm adding this primarily on the underside of the green. Just a touch, not too overwhelming, because my primary lights color here is going to be the green. All right, so now is the most gratifying part of this whole thing. I'm tapping the adjustments wand, and then under perspective blur, I'm tapping layer because we're gonna apply this to the whole layer. Just like before, I'm going to zoom out so that I can see where I'm positioning my blur from. And I'm gonna start by just dragging it downward. And then I'm using a single finger to drag and increase the blur, as you can see by this blue bar, to 100%, and it already looks way better, but I think we can get the sort of ribbon effect that Northern Lights has by positioning this in the lower right. And then I'm tapping the wand to apply that. And now I do want to increase the intensity of this just a smidge. To do that really easily, I'm duplicating the layer, and then I'm going to tap on the layer to decrease the layer opacity. And I'm going to bring this down to about 25%, but if I hide it, you can see that just makes a little bit of a difference, and I like that it pops just a little more. Then I'm pinching to merge both of these layers together, and then just as we did with the horizon, we're going to create a mirror of this. So I'm duplicating this Northern Lights layer once more, and on my duplicated layer, I'm tapping the transform arrow here, reposition my canvas, and I still have snapping and magnetics turned on. And then I'm going to tap flip vertical, which will create this mirrored image. And then with the magnetics, I'm able to drag this downward. You can also distort it a bit to give it a little bit more of that fishbowl effect. Then in my layers panel, I'm going to tap the layer and reduce the opacity down to about 50%. And then as a final touch, I'm going to use the smudge tool, and not as much as I did with the iceberg and the narwhal, but still a little bit. I'm going to use some horizontal strokes to blend this out. Thank you so much for watching. I hope that this was helpful. Hopefully you learned something. Let me know what you thought of these techniques in the comments below. Give this video a thumbs up if you liked it, and subscribe to my channel for more. And if you make this and you post it on Instagram, be sure to tag me. I would love to see your work. Thank you again for watching, and I will see you in the next one. Bye.